Forget hierarchy. How does a construction company actually run as a true team? That's exactly what we're unpacking on this episode of Construction Genius. My guest is John Abrams, founder of South Mountain Company, a 40-person architecture, building, and solar firm that's one of the highest scoring B Corps in the world and a thriving working cooperative. In this conversation, we explore what it really takes to build a company where leadership is shared, decisions are driven by expertise, not by authority or power, and employees have true ownership, not just in the company, but in its culture and future. If you've ever wrestled with how to create more accountability, engagement, and resilience inside your business, this episode will give you practical ideas and a fresh perspective. Let's dive right in. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. John, welcome to Construction Genius.
Nice to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to have this conversation. And you've built a 40-person architecture, building, and solar firm into one of the highest scoring B Corps in the world. How does a company like that actually function day to day when ownership, profits, power, and purpose are shared across all stakeholders?
Well, not so differently than any healthy company, but highly collaborative. And there's this strong sense of engagement because people are sharing ownership and a sense that we are so in this together. And I think that makes people more accountable, not just more engaged, but more accountable. So you can expect that people are going to do their jobs in exemplary ways.
So explain to us a little bit. I'm familiar with a C Corp, but I've got to be honest, I'm not familiar with the idea of a B Corp. Can you explain that a little bit to us for those who may not be familiar?
B Corps can be any kind of structure. They can be C Corps, they can be LLCs, they can be S Corps, but B Corp is a very specific thing. It's a certification program in which companies go through a very rigorous assessment performed by this organization called B Lab. There are 8,000 of those companies in the world right now. And what happens is that B Lab is looking at your business from a triple bottom line perspective. How are you doing as a profitable business? How are you doing as a business that is committed to social impact? How are you doing as a business committed to the environment? And you have to satisfy all three of those in very important ways. And there's another part of this that B Lab, when they developed this system, also developed legislation to allow for what's called a beneficial corporation. And that legislation has now been passed, I don't know exactly, Eric, probably in 37 states. And it allows companies in their articles of organization with the state to organize as a beneficial corporation, which means that they are in perpetuity not committed to maximizing profits, but they are committed to serving other purposes as well. And to be a beneficial corporation, you have to report to the state every year about your beneficial activities.
What are some of the benefits that a beneficial company accrues as a result of going B Corp?
Well, I have to tell you that when B Corp first started, they asked us to become a B Corp. And one of the things about B Corp is it's a label. It's an important label that's known in the world. And we were a very local business, and it wasn't going to help our brand much. But we also felt like we already did all this stuff. And what we learned was that but we decided to do it because we wanted to help this movement. We thought it was important. We thought it was valuable. Our thinking that we were already doing all this stuff couldn't have been further from the truth. What we found when we really did this assessment is that there was so much to think about that we had not thought about before, or that we weren't practicing in a documented way. So the great thing about B Corp is that it makes you think differently about the practice of doing business and being a force for good in the world.
How does it make you specifically think about doing things differently?
So we all have our practices, and many of us, it's kind of knee-jerk. It's intuitive. We do it in ways that make sense to us. With a B Corp designation, you have to codify these behaviors and these activities, and you have to make a commitment to the employees in your company that this is the way we work, this is the culture of the company, and you can expect this from us. So leadership becomes more accountable.
Does that codification in any way, how does it impact the living out of it? Some people might say if we codify it, then we're going to suck the life out of it. Whereas, if we just live it out, it's just who we are. And that codification then brings in something that sort of begins to constrain us, perhaps.
It's a great point. And that's also something that people say about growth. You lose the homey nature of a business and suddenly all these systems have to be. So I think that's a cultural thing. There are a lot of ways you can suck the life out of a business. And it's the human parts that we all love. And it's the relationships that we all love. And whether you're a B Corp or not, we can keep those going and keep those alive and keep those fresh and keep them exciting.
In a B Corp, now though, you said there was the three pillars are people, planet, and profits.
Yes.
And so the philosophy is that we're not going to elevate one of those above another, but we're going to balance them all together in terms of the way we operate the business. Is that the idea?
Yeah, the idea is three bottom lines. We're paying attention to three bottom lines.
Yeah. How do you balance the tension between that? Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example. It's like, so I have someone working in my business and they're not a high performer. And so therefore they're impacting my profitability to one degree or another. But then if I'm taking them into account as well, I may be reluctant to let them go because I know that if I do, that's going to cause them hardship economically. Is that a dilemma that you have, or am I just kind of making something up that doesn't make sense?
I think that is such a constant dilemma. So all I can say about that particular dilemma is never in my career did I let somebody go and not feel that I waited too long. You know what I mean?
Because no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
One of the things that's happening there, it's not just about performance, it's about morale. So that person is tanking the morale for everybody else because they're carrying that person. And I think we often feel like, hey, we can fix this. And sometimes we can. So we put a lot of energy into trying to bring that particular individual along. But I think there's an art to recognizing when we are failing. We don't have the right position for that person, or we don't know how to get through to that person.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today. How does your company function on a decision-making basis? Because on the one hand, perhaps a B Corp would be less hierarchical, less command and control, more collaborative. But on the other hand, sometimes there's two equally perhaps viable paths that a business could go down, and we need to make a decision on which path to follow. If we go by the collaborative and consensus path, we may not reach an agreement on which path to go forward, and someone at some point has to make a call. So how do you handle that?
So collaboration and consensus, collaboration yet, but consensus is not built into the nature of the B Corp. It is, however, built into the worker co-op, which is what South Mountain is. And that balance is a great challenge. So one of the things about worker co-ops is that they're decisions that the owners make. And ownership is widespread, but when it comes to setting the policies, the future direction, the owners decide that. But when it comes to management decisions, you don't want a bunch of people sitting around trying to figure out who's going to build the stairway or drawing straws. The company leadership is every bit as important in a worker co-op as in any other business.
So describe that to us a little bit. South Mountain is your company, and did it begin as a worker co-op, or did you transition into that? How did that all work out?
I started that company when I was 23, 1973, and about 12 years later, two very close friends who had worked in the company from the very beginning came to me and said, so we've been talking to each other, and we don't want to take the usual route, go out and start our own businesses. We want to stay here for our careers, but we need more of a stake. So at that moment, I could have made them into partners at some level, but it occurred to me that if we do our job well here, this will happen over and over. Could we imagine a structure that would welcome new owners over time? And we were lucky we did not have to imagine it, because this was in 1986, and we stumbled on the worker co-op. And at that time, there were about a dozen worker co-ops in the US. There are about 1,000 now, growing tremendously. And worldwide, it's the largest form of employee ownership. But anyway, so there was nobody, there was no infrastructure. And we found a company with an attorney who helped these transitions. So it was just a lucky hinge point of South Mountain. By the way, those dozen co-ops, 50 years later, 10 of them are thriving, and 11th just closed the doors after 50 years in business. So
why do you like the co-op model as opposed to another model like maybe an ESOP or something like that?
Good question. So there are really three main forms of employee ownership: the worker co-op, the ESOP, and the employee ownership trust. Worldwide, the co-op is most widespread. In the US, by far, if you ask anybody in the US about employee ownership, in the first sentence of their response, they'll say ESOP.
Yeah.
Most employee-owned companies are ESOPs. There are about 6,000 of them, 13 million employees. But first of all, ESOPs are tremendously regulated by federal law, and there's a lot of compliance. They're complicated to start, they're complicated to maintain, and complicated means expensive. So they're very applicable, but mostly to larger companies, at least 50 employees, $10 million a year. And I think of that as a minimum. But for me, the thing about ESOPs is that there's no democracy baked into the ESOP structure. Some ESOPs are very democratic by choice, but it's few. The worker co-op has it baked into the structure entirely. And then there's this third, which is really interesting, the employee ownership trust, which is very new to the US. I think there are only about 50 or 60 of them right now, but they're gaining traction. And that is the most widespread form of employee ownership all over the UK. So you have these great choices, and every company is so different, and the mentality of each company and each founder and what appeals to you is what's important to pursue. So I'm very agnostic about, if somebody says to me, what should I do with my business? I'm going to say, explore these options.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about the idea of a co-op. you use the word democracy. What do you mean by the word democracy as it relates to a business?
So I mean that there is true collaborative shared decision making, and that when it comes to issues that affect everybody's lives and the future of the business, there's a democratic decision making process.
So that would mean
One vote, one person.
one vote, one person. Okay.
Yeah.
So does that then lead us to have to, in a certain way, compartmentalize decisions? Because there are certain decisions in a business that don't lend themselves to a democratic process, where perhaps there's other decisions that do lend themselves to a democratic process.
Yes, I think it absolutely does. So people don't really like hierarchies that are based on power. That's just top down. You do this because I say so. But people love hierarchies of expertise. And so you don't want to lose that. In a worker co-op, many, many decisions are made by the people who are most qualified to make those decisions.
So that's interesting, that dynamic of hierarchy of expertise versus a hierarchy of power. If a worker co-op is going to succeed, what kind of hiring practices need to distinguish it from a regular company that works more on that hierarchical basis?
Well, we learned this the hard way. So in the early days, somebody would come in on a Friday afternoon and say, hey, I got this friend. He's a super guy. He wants a job. And I would say, come in Monday and put him to work. 35 years later, that same person would be there. And what we learned was that we're not hiring employees, we're hiring future owners.
Right.
And we need to think about in those terms. We can teach people things, we can teach skills,
Yeah.
we can train, but we can't change people. They are who they are. So hiring for cultural fit.
Tell me about then, when you're hiring someone, how do you know that they don't have an ownership mentality like you were just describing?
We don't. We are so not right all the time.
Right.
But it's a skill, again, that you hone over time and you just get a feeling. And so you ask questions that lead people to help you understand whether they really do have that. And by the way, in employee-owned businesses, often people are applying for jobs because it's employee-owned. They're attracted to that.
Right. What distinguishes then, as you reflect on the people who have been the most successful in your business, the longest lasting, making the biggest contributions, what are 2 or 3 shared traits that they have?
They're great listeners. They listen before they talk. Certainly, they're people that like other people and like to collaborate and like to work together in teams. Those are the big ones that come to mind. I'm probably plenty more.
No, yeah, it's interesting. Why did you lead with listening? What's so important about that?
It's really the way I think that we learn. Most of us in conversation, as somebody is talking, we're formulating our response rather than really hearing what they're saying, real active listening. And I find that people that make great teammates are people that listen in that way.
How do you practice that? Because, what you described, there's a very human thing to do, right? Formulating the response before, while we're in a conversation. How do you practice not doing that?
I think you used the right word, practice. I think it takes practice. I think we're acculturated to always being on the ball and having the right answer right away.
Yeah.
And slowing down, calming down, and really listening to that other person and what they're saying is a practice.
Yeah. When you moved to this employee ownership model, this co-op model, how did it feel to give away control?
First, like I was tugging on the reins of a runaway horse. I was afraid. But what I was afraid of was that this thing that I had been responsible for building, that I love, would turn into something that I didn't love anymore. And it was a fear that turned out to be unfounded, but I think it's real. So there were 2 stages for me. One was relinquishing ownership in the early days in 1987. But the big one, and the big one that every founder will experience at some time, is turning over leadership to the next generation.
Yeah.
For me, that was a journey of absolute joy. Not that I wasn't holding back at times and worried at times, but we intentionally planned for years. And we started this in 2005. I took a 6-month sabbatical to write a book and to experiment with distributed leadership and management. And the 6 months, book wasn't done, came back. The experiment had been a miserable failure. The morale had tanked. And so we spent 6 months figuring out, what did we do wrong here? How could we have done it better? And I took another 6 months, left, finished the book, got back. The system we had put in place had gained traction. People were very, very excited. And that system lasted until the present day.
Yeah.
It's been adjusted over time. So that was eye-opening to me. But it doesn't mean that I was particularly good at letting go. I mean, one thing I was really good at, my career was actually consisted of learning many new skills in a half-baked way, but learning them just well enough to be able to hire people that could do them better than I could do them. So that was good. But I also held it in. For a long time, I thought that my job was to shoulder the burdens, was to protect people from stress. And it's embarrassing to me that it took me so long to learn it. But when I really learned, it was in 2008 when the crash came and our existence was threatened. And it was clear to me that I had to engage everybody in the process of understanding what was happening to us, and everything had to be on the table, and figuring out what the solutions were. And what I found is that, no, that's not my job. I mean, my job is to serve as a leader, to be a servant leader, but it's not my job to protect people. My job is to share with people and engage them in a way that they can have an impact on the business.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview. So that's interesting. How do you do that then? How do you engage people in the business without damaging the business?
Great way is open book management.
What does that mean?
So open book management was really pioneered by a guy named Jack Stack, who wrote a terrific book about it. And open book management is the practice of sharing all the financials with everybody, frontline workers, everybody, teaching them how they can impact the bottom line.
Does that include sharing salaries?
No.
Okay.
It includes, for companies that practice open book management well, I think it always includes sharing wage ranges so that people can know what to expect as they move up the org chart. And some companies do share actual wages and salaries. We asked our company at one point, do people want to share them? They said, no, I don't want to know what he's making exactly. I don't know. I want to know what I can make as I move up. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. I know that many people who are listening to this are used to hierarchical leadership. It's just what works in construction. And so if I'm running a field-heavy construction firm with lots of skilled trades, not many college degrees, How realistic is this worker cooperative model in that world?
100%. It can only make a company better. Even in that world, I don't think there's a good reason why we use these hierarchical methods. I think it's what our culture, which is so individualistic, has encouraged, and we accept it. But it's not necessarily the best way to get things done. We used to do a lot of timber framing, and there's an organization called the North American Timber Framers Guild, and it's companies that do kind of traditional timber joinery and timber raising. And you're working with these big sticks. It can't very well be mechanized. It takes great teams and in fact, building itself, it takes teams, not, right? And yep, you do need a coach, but you don't necessarily need a lot of top-down hierarchy.
So that's interesting, right? Because I think
it works everywhere.
Yeah, you're right. When it comes to teamwork, obviously construction is a team sport.
Yes.
I just think that people are going to struggle because it's like, you're on a job site, someone's got to make a call. And how does that teamwork element then play into that?
Once again, it's that hierarchy of expertise that should be making the call. But we are not taught that in school. We are taught to compete and win. We are not taught to collaborate.
Right. Okay. So because there's a different sort of perspective on human beings, right? So one person might say, I want to tap into the healthy selfishness of an individual, right? Because I know that if I can frame something in terms of what's in it for them, then the logic there is that that's going to then motivate them, as opposed to framing it, what's in it for us. And so is that just the different, that me versus us perspective? Is that just a matter of different people have different perspectives, or is it everyone is capable of having that us perspective?
Well, that's what I think, Eric. But my experience is limited to my experience.
Yeah.
But what I have seen over time is that when people are invited in, when their opinion is respected, and when they are allowed to be part of the solution, they love it. They love it.
Right. Tell us a little bit about this book that you're writing.
Well, it just got published by Barrett Kohler Publishers on Tuesday. So it just came out.
Is this the first book you've written?
No, on my sabbatical in 2005.
I know. You said you didn't finish it, though.
No, I did. I went back and finished it, and then I wrote a second edition. But that was a long time ago. That book is still in print, but it's from a different time in my life. And this one has a very different purpose. Right now, in the U.S., there are 3 million businesses with employees that have founders over 55. And every one of those businesses is going to transition in the next 15, 20 years. And many of them some are going to be passed down in families, but far less than in the past.
Yeah.
Many of them are going to unceremoniously close the doors because they can't find a buyer and leave a hole in Main Street. Others, the successful ones, are targets for strategic buyers and private equity, the rapacious private equity.
Yeah.
Actually will buy these businesses and amalgamate them and move them out of their community, sometimes carve them up and sell them for parts. And my experience is that that most founders of businesses believe in their businesses. They want the purpose to go on. They care about the people in the businesses too. And so these people often come away with, well, I call it fat wallets and broken hearts.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. But business advisors, attorneys, bankers, financial planners, succession consultants, they have no idea, by and large, about the employee ownership options that are available to all of these businesses. And I want to make that information, put it out there so that it's more widespread, because when you do put it out there, people are surprised, attracted, and often take that route. And I also feel like working people have been left behind. So, from the 30s to the 70s, unions got great wage increases and benefits for American working people and really created a prosperous American middle class. And then at the end of that time in the 70s, wealth inequality had diminished tremendously. And in fact, at that time, the average corporate CEO made 20 times the average working person. Now it's 250 or 300 times as much. If working people had kept pace with CEOs, the minimum wage right now would be over $100 an hour. So this is a way that founders of businesses can be rewarded for their investment and employees can be rewarded for theirs at the same time. They are the people that have built these businesses and whose future depends on them. So I think it's just it's a wonderful solution that can have a positive impact on our economy and our culture.
And so the book outlines...
That's what the book is about.
Everything associated with that. Excellent. So I know it's on Amazon, in Audible, Kindle, and the paperback. Is the hardback available too?
No.
No hardback. Great. But all those other...
paperback, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What do you want your legacy to be?
I mean, first of all, I want my legacy to be that he was kind and he cared about people. I would also like to have some impact on better ways of doing business and making business a force for good.
That's excellent. What do you think is the main reason why that's not happening?
I think it is happening.
But why doesn't it happen more?
There isn't a chorus of people promoting this and pushing it and telling stories about it. And mainly it's the stories. I think we need more great stories of business because there are so many family businesses that have been going for 4 or 5 or 6 generations and they're quiet. They just do their work but we need to know about this. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, there's going to be a link in the show notes to where you can pick up the book. John, I really enjoyed this conversation and I appreciate you joining us here today on Construction Genius.
Me too, Eric. You ask great questions. You really do. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Be well.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with John. Feel free to check out his website, check out his book on Amazon. And that book is called From Founder to Future, A Business Roadmap to Impact, Longevity, and Employee Ownership. Links in the show notes to the website and the book. And share the interview with other people that you know would enjoy listening. Give us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast. Thanks very much. Catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.